He endured pain for the alien woman, and her empire rewarded him with royal bonding. The captive's choice. The crystalline walls of the detention cell pulsed with a faint violet luminescence that made Marcus Chen's head throb. 3 weeks he'd been here. 3 weeks since the diplomatic shuttle was shot down over Valthos Prime. 3 weeks of silence, stale nutrition packets, and the constant hum of energy barriers that separated him from freedom. He pressed his palm against the transparent wall, watching the corridor beyond. Valthian guards passed occasionally, their purple skin reflecting the ambient light like polished amethyst, their faces carved into expressions of perpetual displeasure. They never spoke to him, never acknowledged him as anything more than cargo. Marcus had studied their species extensively before the mission. The Valthian were logical, hierarchical, and considered emotional displays a sign of weakness. After 2 decades of border skirmishes with humanity, they'd agreed to peace talks. Those talks died with everyone else on his shuttle. Everyone except him. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, lighter than the guards' heavy treads. Marcus straightened as a figure emerged from the shadows. She was Valthine, unmistakably so, with skin the color of twilight and hair that cascaded like liquid silver down her shoulders. Unlike the guards' functional armor, she wore flowing robes that suggested status, embroidered with symbols Marcus recognized as noble house markers. She stopped before his cell, studying him with eyes that shimmered between violet and gold. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, human, medic, age 29, decorated for saving 17 soldiers during the frontier offensive. Her voice was melodic, each word precisely enunciated. Marcus kept his expression neutral. "You've done your homework? I am Lady Cyrena Volneth, 3rd daughter of House Volneth, overseer of external affairs." She tilted her head slightly. "Your presence here is complicated. I imagine capturing the sole survivor of your attack makes negotiations difficult." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise? Amusement? It vanished too quickly to tell. "It was not our attack, but convincing your people of that truth becomes harder with each passing day." Before Marcus could respond, the palace shuddered. A deep, resonant boom echoed through the structure, followed by the wail of alarms. Cyrena stumbled, catching herself against the wall as the lights flickered. What? Another explosion, closer this time. The barrier containing Marcus sputtered and died. Through the sudden chaos of running guards and crackling comm systems, I heard screaming. Cyrena's hand went to a device at her waist, her composed facade cracking. Impossible. We're in the heart of the capital. Nothing should breach. The kitchen above her erupted in a shower of crystal shards. Marcus moved on instinct, diving through the deactivated barrier and tackling her to the floor. Debris rained down where she had been standing. He covered her with his body as chunks of crystalline architecture crashed around them. When the tremor subsided, Marcus found himself staring down into those strange, shifting eyes. She was breathing hard, her cool skin pressed against his chest. For a moment, neither moved. "You saved me," she whispered, disbelief coloring her tone. "It's what I do. Medical training doesn't distinguish between species." Cyrena stared at his extended hand as though he'd offered her poison. Then, slowly, she placed her palm in his. Her skin was smooth, surprisingly warm. When he pulled her to her feet, she didn't immediately let go. Another explosion rocked the palace. Through the gaping hole in the ceiling, Marcus could see smoke rising from the city beyond. "We need to move," he said. That sounded like plasma charges, military grade. Cyrena's expression hardened with determination. "The royal vaults, they're fortified against orbital strikes. If we can reach..." A section of wall exploded inward, revealing armed figures in black armor. Not Velthian guards. Insurgents. One raised a weapon toward Cyrena. Marcus didn't think. He lunged forward, placing himself between the weapon and the alien woman who moments ago had been his captor. The plasma bolt caught him in the shoulder, and his world became fire. The forbidden ritual. Pain consumed everything. Marcus's vision blurred red as he collapsed against Cyrena. The smell of his own burning flesh filled his nostrils. Through the haze, he heard her voice, no longer controlled but raw with something that sounded like fear. "Hold on, just hold on." She dragged him through a side passage as weapons fire erupted behind them. Marcus's legs barely functioned, each step a fresh wave of agony. The wound in his shoulder was catastrophic. He'd seen enough battlefield injuries to know it had damaged the brachial artery.
Minutes. He had minutes before blood loss took him. "Leave me," he gasped. "Get to safety." Silence. Cyrena's grip tightened around his waist. Her usual composure had shattered, replaced with fierce determination. "You took that weapon's fire for me. I will not dishonor that sacrifice." They stumbled into a small chamber filled with strange equipment, crystalline formations arranged in precise geometric patterns connected by threads of light. Cyrena lowered Marcus to the floor with surprising gentleness. His blood pooled beneath him, dark against the luminescent tiles. She knelt beside him, her hands hovering over his wound. "This will seem impossible. Everything in your training will tell you to refuse." Her eyes met his, and for the first time Marcus saw genuine emotion in their depths. Desperation. "What are you talking about?" Marcus's words slurred. Shock was setting in. Cyrena's fingers traced symbols in the air, and the crystal formations began to glow. An ancient practice, forbidden now, especially between species. The binding of souls. It will link your life force to mine. Share your pain, share your healing. "But Marcus," she hesitated, "it cannot be undone ever. You would carry part of me forever, and I would carry you." Through the dimming edges of his consciousness, Marcus understood what she was offering, a permanent connection to an alien woman, to a species humanity had warred against. His superiors would call it contamination, his family would never understand. But he would be alive. "Do it," he whispered. Cyrena's fingers trembled as she placed them on his chest, directly over his heart. "Forgive me for what comes next." She began to chant in a language that predated written history, guttural and beautiful simultaneously. The crystal surrounding them blazed with violent light, then she pressed her palms against his wound, and Marcus screamed. It wasn't just pain, it was as though his entire being was being torn apart and rewoven. He felt her presence flood into him like ice water through his veins. Memories that weren't his flashed through his mind. A childhood in crystalline towers, the weight of expectation from a demanding mother, centuries of loneliness disguised as duty, the first time she had seen humans and felt curiosity instead of contempt. And she was experiencing him in return. His grief over his sister's death in the war, his belief that peace was possible, the way he held dying soldiers and promised them they'd see home again, his capacity for love despite all the violence he'd witnessed. Their minds crashed together like colliding stars, and for a moment Marcus couldn't tell where he ended and she began. Then the light faded. Marcus gasped, his chest heaving. The pain in his shoulder had diminished to a dull ache. When he looked down, he saw the wound closing, not fully healed but no longer fatal. More startling was the faint shimmer beneath his skin, a subtle purple glow that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. Cyrena collapsed beside him, her silver hair spilling across the floor. Her skin had lost some of its vibrant color, but when she looked at him, her eyes were different, softer, warmer. "I feel," she whispered, wonder in her voice. "Your emotions, they're so loud, so vivid. How do humans function with such intensity?" Marcus sat up slowly, marveling at his restored strength. Through the bond, he sensed her exhaustion, her fear, and beneath it all, a loneliness so profound that it made his heart ache. "You've been alone," he said quietly, "for so long." Tears formed in her eyes, something Valthine supposedly couldn't do. "I don't understand this, what you make me feel." "Neither do I." Marcus reached out, gently wiping the tear from her cheek. The moment his fingers touched her skin, sensation exploded through the bond, her shock at the tenderness, his awe at her vulnerability, emotions feeding back and forth until neither could breathe. An alarm blared, harsh and sudden. They jerked apart as automated defenses activated. A voice echoed through the medical bay. "Lady Cyrena Volneth, Lieutenant Marcus Chen, by order of the High Court and Her Imperial Majesty, you are commanded to present yourselves immediately. Resistance will be met with lethal force." Palace guards materialized in the doorway, weapons raised. Through the bond, Marcus felt Cyrena's despair crash against his own determination. Their hiding was over. Now came the reckoning. Trial of two souls. The High Court chamber was a cathedral of crystal and light, its vaulted ceiling reaching towards the violet sky of Valthos Prime. Marcus stood in the center of the circular floor, surrounded by tiers of Valthian nobles whose faces were carved from judgment and tradition. Beside him, Cyrena maintained a rigid composure. Though through the bond I felt her fear like ice in her veins. The Empress sat on an elevated throne of black crystal, her presence commanding absolute attention. She was an older version of Cyrena, same silver hair, same violet skin, but her eyes held the weight of centuries and the coldness of countless difficult decisions. "Explain yourself, daughter." The Empress's voice carried across the chamber without need for amplification. "You have violated sacred law. The soul binding is forbidden between noble houses without court approval. Between species? She gestured dismissively. There are no words for such transgression. Cyrena stepped forward, her chin lifted defiantly. I saved his life, mother. He took a weapons fire meant for me. Would you have me honor that sacrifice with his death? I would have you honor your duty to your people above all else. The Empress's gaze shifted to Marcus, and she felt the full force of her scrutiny. This human carries our essence now. He is contaminated with nobility he has no right to claim. I claim nothing, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the hostile attention of hundreds of eyes. I didn't ask for this bond, but I won't apologize for it either. Murmurs rippled through the court. A figure rose from the lower tiers, a male Valthian with skin the color of deep amethyst and eyes that burned with barely contained rage. Lord Theron Valcortis, Marcus realized, through the bond, reading Cyrena's recognition and dread. The human speaks out of turn, as expected from his barbaric kind.